Wow, listen to that. It's a downpour. It's a cloudburst. Well, shooters and reloaders out there, Fortune Cookie 45 LC coming to you from the Hot Lead Zone. And the title of this video is FYI, the ins and outs of neck expansion. Now, for all of you experienced reloaders out there, you know all about this stuff already, and you might not give it much thought, but you already know this stuff. But for you newer reloaders out there, you've read about this and you've heard about the subject, but you might not fully grasp the considerations involved. And it's for this purpose that this video is being made, to open up this subject. Good grief, that pun was really sick, wasn't it? Sorry about that. Neck expansion is actually a procedure, a process that's done on our brass casings so that the bullet will be held with the proper tension. That's called neck tension, because you have to have neck tension. If all you had to hold a bullet was the crimp, it would not be effective. Neck tension is actually more important than the crimp for bullet integrity and powder ignition. And this subject is integrally related to the thesis of resizing our brass, because when brass is fired, it's too big. It won't hold a bullet. So just imagine that this was a huge 308 case, and now it's been fired and the brass is too big, so now you try and put a 30 caliber bullet in there and it just slides in. It won't hold, so you have to resize the case so that it'll function again in the chamber, but it'll also be able to hold the bullet. And that means you have to resize the brass here to fit the chamber, and you gotta resize the neck to hold the bullet. With straight wall cases like our 38 Special, 44 Special, 44 Magnum, 45 ACP, also 458 Win Mag, all these are straight cases. The resizing again will allow the bullet to go back in and have tension. But straight-sided cases don't have much problem, because what you do after you resize it, then it's too small. You have to have this expanded. The neck has to be expanded to be the proper opening here to hold the bullet with a proper tension. So that's done with an expanding plug, usually in the second die, that just goes in and expands it. Now that neck is right against the expanding plug, and the plug's the same size as what it's trying to open that up to. So when you pull the case out, it usually just slides straight out. And that puts very little stress on the neck on the way out. Now, it's possible that if your resizing die made this way too small, that then when the plug goes in to expand it to the proper width here, that the tension is so great, the amount of expansion is so great, that there's so much grab that when you pull that case out of the die, it might very well cause some stress to the case, maybe even lengthening the case by a thousandth or so. But if the dies are set up properly, you don't get that much stress to the neck. As you pull it out, you don't get the distortion to stretch your neck. Bottleneck cases like 308, 223, 556, of course, all of your bottleneck cases are a different story, because you got a neck that's smaller than the case body. What normally happens is you have something like this. Inside your sizing die, there's a decapping pin here, and then there is actually what they call an expander ball. So what happens is that it's actually a little smaller than your bullet. So what happens is when the case is put into the resizing die, the expanding ball just drops right in, because this has been expanded. This neck's been expanded. So it just drops in, and then the decapping pin goes through and knocks the dead primer out, while the case body goes ahead and squeezes down the body of the case, plus it squeezes down the neck, so that now this opening is too small for your bullet. Well, it has to be too small, because if it's still too big, it won't work. So it makes it too small, But then it depends on the expanding ball to come through here and reopen this neck to the right diameter, which is typically 1/1000 to 2/1000 smaller than your bullet, so you get the right bullet tension. So here you go. The ball is bigger than the opening. And so the neck here has a diameter that's smaller than the ball, so it's not the same as in a straight wall case where it's the same size. This thing bumps onto the bottom of the neck, and then as you work your press, it actually pulls and forces that bigger ball now through the neck and opens the neck up. This causes a lot of stress, and if you don't have lube in there, if you don't have lubrication in there, what happens is that ball will not only stretch the neck, but it'll also distort your shoulder. Terrible things will happen. And sometimes you don't get enough distortion that your bolt action can still cam and close the action, but if the distortion's really bad, it's bad. And your ammo will not benefit by any of this. Now this problem was so much of a problem before that when I was shooting high power, a competitor named David Tubb, a very championship shooter, did a lot of videos and teaching where he even recommended turning down the expander ball a little bit, say by 1/1000 or 15/10,000. And this causes a reduction in the stress to the neck as it's being pulled out. Now this caused more neck tension on the bullet by a little bit, but that was actually more desirable than getting distortion of the neck or stretching of the neck or a distortion of the shoulder caused by the bigger ball. So making the ball smaller was actually better. And so he advocated doing that, and a lot of us did that. Now you'll hear a lot of times that the recommendation is to get some lube on here, and some recommend just smearing a little bit of paste lube on the inside of the neck, and others will hit this with a little mist of spray, and you'll get a little bit of lube in there. But the problem is you want the lube at the bottom of the neck, not at the outside, because it's the bottom of the neck that when that ball is being pulled through, it hits the bottom of the neck, and it's right there that the stress starts. So you want the lube there. Now, of course, as the ball is pulled through, it'll pick up any lube you have on the inside of the neck, so the next case that you do will benefit from that. But you really want the primary to be at the bottom of the neck. So you see how big a problem this can be? If the world were perfect, the expander ball would pull out without any stress at all delivered to the neck or the shoulder of the case, leaving no dimensional change, except for the fact that now it's perfect to hold a bullet, even a powder-coated bullet. I think what happens is, with all the experienced reloaders out there, when we're pulling the case out of our resizing die, we have learned that we don't want to feel a lot of drag when that expander ball is being pulled out of the case. So I think sometimes we actually feel a lot of stress, and then we're going to go ahead and remeasure the length of the case to see if there's been any stretching to occur, or we'll also inspect the shoulder to see that it hasn't been distorted, this kind of thing. So we're wary of this problem. Plus, a lot of reloaders will make it a habit to go ahead and do any trimming of the case after we resize, because it doesn't make any sense to trim and then resize, and then if we get some stretching, we got to trim them again. Now, of course, one way that we can avoid having this problem is to have a custom chamber and a custom die that neck sizes and controlled neck thickness, so that by using these bushings in the neck sizing die, we actually squeeze the neck down perfectly, with the neck thickness being allowed, so that when all this is done, the inside neck dimension is perfect without having to use an expanding ball. But that requires a lot of customization, and it's done for precision reloading with very expensive custom rifles, this kind of thing. The other way to get around this problem is by using the Lee neck sizing collet die, because this gets away from the expanding ball. The way this works is that there is a mandrel in there, and the neck is sized to the right inside diameter by having a collet squeeze the neck down onto that mandrel. And then when the die releases the case, when you're taking the case out of the die, the spring back of the brass will release off the mandrel, and it winds up being the right dimension inside there, and then the case just comes out frictionlessly. And this causes concentricity, which is amazing because the mandrel is centered in the case, and you've got a concentric neck and this kind of thing with the Lee neck sizing collet die. This thing is actually a piece of engineering genius, and it's very reasonable to get that. So we really like these. However, the limitations of this die are that you cannot use it when you have to have cases of full length sizing necessary, such as lever action rifles or using a different rifles, this kind of thing. For bolt guns, this thing is really very useful. Reloaders out there, take care. I'm gonna go get some orange juice. Bye for now.